Bukayo Saka and Nwaneri are, or Saka is about to enter talks over a new deal. Nwaneri could be offered a new 5-year contract. And of course, both of these players, absolute key players, but they're still under contract for another 2 years, I think, in both their cases. But you look at how Liverpool have handled the Salah, Van Dijk, and Trent situations, where all three could leave for nothing at the end of the season. But Arsenal, even though Saka and Nwaneri are still tied down until 2027, they're making an effort now to get them tied down for the future. So, first of all, just how key is that to show a player, just how much they are valued and also boost the club's chances of tying them down to these new contracts?
Really important. Absolutely. I mean, we always talk about new signings in the summer, but the sort of next round of contract renewals Arsenal have got coming up is so important to sort of keeping on what's gone on in the last few years, because it's not just Saka or Nwaneri. You got Saliba, Gabriel, Martinelli kind of falls into that category, even though he's got an option, which means he's still got 3 years left technically as well. Miles Lewis Skelly as well. These are really crucial key players, and they're not going to be that easy, these contract renewals. Saliba and Saka went down to into the final year last year, and they started about this point last time, and then it got down into the final year before they actually did agree these deals. So you've got to start them relatively early. My big worry about the fact that Arsenal haven't had a sporting director for 4 or 5 months now has been these contract renewals that are coming up. Someone's got to get a firm grip on them, because you look at what's happened at Liverpool, for example, as you said. There was a time when Liverpool didn't have a firm sporting director in place, and these things were allowed to slide a little bit. And by the time you get someone through the door, the clock's ticking, and it makes it an awful lot harder. So Arsenal need to start these renewals. I asked William Saliba the other day if he'd started yet, and he said no. He said there was no rush. I think the fan base won't agree with that. I think the fan base will want these done and dusted. Arsenal's last set of renewals were a major success. Everyone signed, starting from Gabriel, they went through the spine of the team until Ben White signed last year. They got Saka, Odegaard, Gabriel, Saliba, Martinelli, Odegaard, all done and dusted. And it was a real success. No one left. Now they've got to start it again, and it's got to be a success again, because you don't want to lose any of these players. And we know that everyone's going to be sniffing around Saka, Saliba, Gabriel. Who wouldn't want those players? So it's going to be incredibly difficult for Arsenal, but these are deals they need to get done. So for me, Andrea Berta, once his appointment's confirmed, which should be fairly soon, I think he's got to just dive headfirst into these contract renewals and really show these players that Arsenal mean business and they want them to stay.
Yeah, that was a key point of Edu's reign, wasn't it? Just, yeah, I think 2022 when, Martinelli was like, I just need to get a pen. He signs them, like you say, Saliba, Gabriel, Saka, White, they all sign.
Mm.
And like you said, there are going to be rival clubs who are sniffing around these top talents. I think, Man City, was previous links with Nwaneri and Saka, Chelsea as well with Nwaneri, as they're linked with every young player under the face of the sun. And looking at obviously the Arsenal project is a brilliant project to be involved in, but it's still without a Premier League title under Mikel Arteta. So is there any concern from your side that players might be tempted to the fact that Arteta hasn't won a Premier League title yet, that they could be tempted to leave, or are you not concerned about that at all?
Oh no, I'm concerned. I'm definitely concerned. You don't want these players leaving, and for as much as there's this emotional tie at Arsenal with his group because they've come through together, you want to win trophies. If you're a top footballer, you want to win trophies. William Saliba will be walking into the French national team squad every meet up that they have, and looking around that change room, seeing what all of his mates have won at Real Madrid and everything like that, and he'll want a piece of that. And no matter how much he loves Arsenal, which he clearly does, and he spoke about it really well, I thought, in a press conference the other day when we all sat down with him, and he said that unless you win trophies, you get forgotten pretty easily at a club like this, and it's true. But you can't. He's not going to wait forever, and so you've got to. These players need to believe that they can still win at Arsenal, even though it hasn't happened yet. I think they do. I don't think we've got to the stage where they would have lost faith in the project or Arteta or anything like that. But there comes a point when you've got to start winning. These aren't like 18, 20-year-old kids anymore. You're moving into the lower to mid 20 age group, where you're sort of looking towards the end of your career. You're not feeling like you're just a kid who's just started in your career. So, yeah, there's definitely concern there for me, but I still think they believe they can win things, and I think there's a hurt around Arsenal, around that changing room, the fact that they haven't been able to do it. They feel that pain, I think, and they would love to put it right and finally bring this Premier League trophy to Arsenal. It's not going to happen this season, obviously. I don't expect any of these contract renewals to be done before the start of next season. I hope I'm wrong, but I don't think, I think it's going to be a fairly long, drawn out process. As I said last time, Saliba and Saka were down into the final years before they eventually signed their last renewals. And so, but I don't think anyone's going to go this summer. I'd be surprised unless someone whacked in a ridiculous bid that just made it impossible to turn down. So I think they're all going to go again for another season. And fingers crossed they can get the job done next time. And if they do, then it's just inevitably easier to keep these players if they know and believe that they can win trophies.
Certainly is, yes. But then you've already spoken about the likes of Saliba, sorry, Gabriel Martinelli. But then you've got two players who are out of contract next summer. That's Trossard and Zinchenko. So Trossard, you've already said how you'd be shocked if both him and Martinelli both stay, and if one of them's going to leave, it would most likely be Trossard. But looking at Zinchenko as well, he had that very good performance against PSV. He's been trialled in that midfield role that Mikel was previously very reluctant to try him in. But like I say, he's out of contract next summer. So is he a player you could also see leaving this summer? Or is there a case to extend his deal given that he's now shown he can function in that midfield role for Arsenal?
I don't think he signs a new deal. I don't think Arsenal would extend his deal. I think it's either they will sell this summer if they have a good bid come in, but I wouldn't surprise if they just think, you know what, he can stay for another season. He'll go on a free at the end of the following season. He could have gone in January. They were open for him leaving in January, but no real offer came in that made it, that made them sort of stand up and take notice of it. And so they were quite happy for him to stay and continue to play because he's a valuable squad member. Mikel doesn't use him anywhere near as much as he used to anymore, but there is still trust in him. And now, like you say, he's shown he can play in that midfield role that I think a lot of us have been calling for him to get some game time in for a while. So I think it all depends on what happens in the summer. If anyone comes in with a bid that Arsenal deems suitable, then they'll look to probably cash in on him and get a little bit of money back on their investment. But if not, I think they'd probably be happy for him just to stay around for another season, be an important squad member next year. It gives you some versatility, and then let him go on a free. But I'd be very surprised if he gets a new contract. I'm not sure he'd want to sign one anyway, but I don't think Arsenal would be overly keen to give him one.